Okay, so before we move on to the ISA section this week, I want to touch base with you guys about part one, what you guys finished reading last week, and fill in any like questions or clarify any understanding, essentially. So essentially, part one's their big takeaway that they want students to have is they want you to think about when you're writing that research paper, your goal is to not just enter in and say, this is what I think about this issue, right? They want you to recognize that what you're saying is part of several different specific conversations among one big, larger conversation that scholars are having, right? So in your writing, you're recognizing that what you are saying is in response to something else. And in order to do that, you're starting with what they say. You're starting with synthesis of pieces. Synthesis is essentially an academic summary. You're starting with these summaries of the pieces, talking about what issues are scholars currently getting at, and how do they relate to each other, right? As you guys start to research, you'll start to see that within different conversations, there will be 2 to 3 major camps, right? And in some cases, sometimes you'll find scholars are all saying one particular thing. But this is the part of your paper, the they say section, that you're catching readers up on what others who have written before you have said about this. Okay, so I want to recognize that this is a new type of writing that many of you guys are being asked to write about. So go ahead, and I would like you to read this initial question right here. All right, finish reading the background information for this point one, then read this initial prompt. The question is, in your initial post, start with sharing your writing instruction background. Then write a few sentences making sense of the idea of starting with others' ideas, introducing your ideas as a response to those ideas. What does that mean to you? What do you think that would actually look like? Okay, so take a second to pause the video, post that initial response. If it's not already, make sure that the video is in a separate tab so you don't like accidentally, exit out of it and have to. Obviously, it wouldn't be that big of a deal if you did. So go ahead and respond to that. Okay, and then the last 2 points that I want to talk about, that I want to essentially make sure that you're taking away from this, have to do with summarizing and then with quotes or integrating the text. Okay, so what I wrote right here is from the textbook. A good summary requires you to first suspend your own beliefs temporarily and put yourself in the shoes of someone else while you are summarizing or synthesizing. Secondly, as you write, have a focus or spin that allows the summary to fit with your own agenda while still being true to the text you are summarizing. So essentially they're saying in your synthesis or summary, the reader shouldn't be able to tell right off the bat what your thoughts are on that. Whether you're in supporting or against that view, they want you to suspend what you have to think and fairly represent the text in a way that you're aiming, they can essentially tell the direction you're going. Okay. However, they emphasize in the latter part of that while you're giving a fair representation of the person's work, you're being intentional about not arguing the other side, right? And by that, you are having an intentional focus or a spin that allows you to still summarize a text in a true way while still like fitting your own agendas, keeping in mind, what is my project? What do I want to say with this, right? If you're using this piece to show like archaic ways that scholars have thought about this, and you're going to say these are these new progressive ways to think about it, you don't want to highlight the strengths of that piece, right? So that's kind of what they're saying. So go ahead and pause and note any questions that you have about summary at this point. Like if this was in person, what would you follow up asking me, right? As well as anything from that first part, when we think of starting with someone else's words and framing our words as a response to theirs, what other questions do you have? Okay, so hold on to what you write for this. This is going to be your follow-up, but at this point I just want you to know what it is that you feel like you need more clarification on, if anything. And then lastly, I feel like this is very straightforward when it talks about quotations. It says surround every quotation with a frame explaining whose words they are, what the quotation means, and how the quotation relates to your own text. What they say must always be connected with what you say. So essentially, I feel like most students, when they read this, they're like, yeah, that makes sense. I do that. I've done that, I think. But I do want to caution you that when students actually get into writing, for some reason, it's very easy to forget. They're like, this is this great quote. They're good about being intentional about selecting quotes, but then in a lot of initial drafts, they just kind of leave it hanging there, leaving it for like the reader to kind of make those inferences. So make sure use this kind of as a checklist after we've gotten to the writing portion and you're picking those quotations and synthesizing them. Do they have each of these things? Okay, so this is the end of the video. At this point, go ahead and write 2 follow-up questions, or if you don't have questions on anything that we covered in part 1 right now, just have 2 responses to other people's experiences, and you'll get the full points for that. Okay? Email me with any questions that you want to discuss privately, or else go ahead and post those below so I could respond, and it's helpful to see other people's questions and my responses. Have a good week, you guys.